Okay, hi, welcome back. This is the video for reading number 9. I'm debating whether I'm going to do a video for reading 10 since it's kind of on the same topic. I might skip I might skip video wise to reading 11 after this because this one kind of covers the readings for 9 and 10. Certainly 9, somewhat 10. Anyway. We'll see when we get there, but for sure this is going to be uh, covering Gettier cases. So, okay. Anyway, I'll jump into it. So, in the last video, we talked about how justification can be conceived of as a causal connection between facts on the ground, the truth, and giving credence to a proposition, the belief. So, justification is then facts on the ground. Yeah, I got okay. Sorry, the video confuses me. This is the one. Okay, facts on the ground and the belief, and the justification is the. Okay, I'm moving in the right direction. Is the connection between them? Okay. Morgan is entertained by this. Um, the fact that I don't work right is amusing to Morgan. All right. Okay. Um, So yeah, so justification is the relationship between the truth, the facts, and the belief. And justification as a relationship explains why that belief is rational, aka based on reason. Okay, so far so good. Now, it's obvious that there has to be a relationship between the truth and the belief. To go back to an earlier example, I don't remember if I used this example in my previous video. I know I get in my in-person classes, so um, we'll assume. Pretend like this is an example I've used before. Um, if I ask my Magic 8 Ball whether it's going to rain tomorrow the and the answer it gives indicates it will rain tomorrow, I don't know that it will rain tomorrow, even if it happens to be true that it will rain tomorrow. I'm just going to keep saying rain tomorrow. I'm trying to summon the rain. I feel bad about that. Morgan doesn't like the rain, but we need it. We kind of need it. Anyway. Okay, thank you. I did use that. All right. So, even if it happens to be true that it will rain tomorrow, I do not know that it's going to rain tomorrow based on what my Max Cake Ball says. Um, so that's because the indicator I'm relying on for whether I should give credence to the proposition that it will rain tomorrow is not causally connected to the fact that it will rain tomorrow. Um, that is, the truth that it will rain tomorrow is not the reason why my Max Cake Ball said it would rain tomorrow. It has a relationship so that my belief that it will rain tomorrow has no relationship to the truth. My belief has a relationship to the result of the Max Cake Ball, but the result of the Max Cake Ball has no relationship to the truth. Okay, so the chain between truth and belief is broken in the intermediary. Okay, so we need a relationship. But the question is just any kind of relationship between the truth and belief enough to make knowledge? In other words, is just any relationship enough to provide the justification? So, Edmund Gettier, the guy who wrote the thing that reading 9, Edmund Gettier argues that it's not. That there has to be only certain kinds of relationships between the truth and the belief will make knowledge. He argues this by proposing that there are special cases where there really is a relationship between truth and belief, but knowledge is still absent. This illustrates, according to him, that not just any relationship between truth and belief provides justification. Okay, so we're going to look at a Gettier case or two, and sort of see what we're talking about here. Okay. So the first thing that Gettier does is he notes that the justification providing relationship is often described as having adequate evidence, which is the guy Chisholm, Roderick Chisholm says that, or having the right to be sure. And that's A.J. Ayer, I think. Anyway, so Gettier offers this weird ass thought experiment. And I'll be the first one to admit that this is a very silly thought experiment, but it's just like thought experiments are, it's just to illustrate the point. No one thinks this will actually happen. It's just to illustrate the kinds of things that can show cracks in the account. Okay, so we got this guy Smith who's up for a job, and this other guy Jones who's up for a job, same job. Now, and again, this is all in the reading, so I'm not going to recount the whole thing. So Smith, the short version is Smith has what he considers to be good evidence that Jones will get the job, that the other guy will get the job. Because the president of the company told Smith that Jones was going to get the job, which seems like an asshole thing to do to me. Like go up to some guy and go, that other guy totally going to get the job. Seems rude, but whatever. Okay. And for whatever reason, Smith also knows that Jones has 10 coins in his pocket. So he concludes that he has good evidence for believing the proposition, the man who gets this job has 10 coins in his pocket. Okay, now let me explain what's happened there. If one proposition directly entails another, and you have reason to believe the first proposition, normally you have good reason to believe the second one. So, let's say, if you, Tulsa, if you have reason to believe Tulsa is the capital of Oklahoma, hang on, I have to pause this. The cats are being ridiculous. Okay. So, where was it? Right, Tulsa is capital of Oklahoma. Okay. No, Tulsa is not the capital of Oklahoma. Jobs and coins. Right, I was explaining sort of what just happening there in terms of entailment. Okay, so, let me pick a different example then. Let's say I have good reason to believe that the Taco Bell on 11th is open 24 hours. Morgan finds this amusing. I have good reason to believe that. I'm not being paid by Taco Bell, I promise. I'm just hungry. I also have good reason to believe that, let's just say randomly, all 24-hour Taco Bells, all 24-hour Taco Bells have comfortable seating. I don't know. Let's just say I have good reason to believe that. So, the conjunction of those beliefs, if I have good reason to believe those things, then I have good reason to believe the Taco Bell on 11th has comfortable seating, right? That's just a simple deductive argument. If I have good reason to believe that all kittens are cute, and good reason to believe that my pets are kittens, then I have good reason to believe that my pets are cute. Okay, easy enough. So what's happening here is, in the example that Gettier has set out, Smith has good reason to believe that Jones will get the job. Why? Because the president said he would. And you think that constitutes a good reason. He also has good reason to believe that Jones has 10 coins in his pockets. because he counted them or something. I don't remember why, but that's but he does. He has good reason to believe it. So therefore, deductively, he has good reason to believe the proposition: the man who will get the job has 10 coins in his pocket. Okay. Now that sounds like a silly proposition, but that will become crucial. Like, why would he care about that? But deductively, according to the rules of logic, he does have reason to believe that, and that is the lever that Gettier is going to lean on to construct his case. Okay, so it seems like Smith rationally believes that the man who will get the job has 10 coins in his pocket. But, twist! M. Night Shyamalan twist. What the twist? I don't know if you watch Robot Chicken. What the twist? Anyway, very, yeah. It turns out that the president was wrong. The hiring committee is going to go with Smith. Smith gets the job. And unbeknownst to Smith, because he's forgetful and he didn't check for these things, Smith does have 10 coins in his pocket, which he didn't realize. Okay, big deal. Well, the issue here that Gettier sets out is this. Smith appears to know, we've already established, Smith appears to know the man who will get this job has 10 coins in his pocket. Because it turned out to be true that the man who got the job has 10 coins in his pocket. Smith did, without knowing they had those 10 coins. And it appears that at every stage of the process, Smith had good reason to believe the things he believed. So he had a true belief with good reasons. That seems to be all the ingredients that we talked about in the last video. That seems to be truth, belief, and justification. But it seems pretty obvious that Smith did not know that, because he had no idea that he was involved in this at all. Technically speaking, yes, it was true that the man who had 10 coins in his pocket got the job. But Smith genuinely thought that was going to be Jones, not him. He didn't even know he had 10 coins in his pocket. It's the only reason that he believed the proposition, the man who will get the job had 10 coins in his pocket, is because he believed a false proposition first, which is the proposition that Jones will get the job. So, what's going on? Did Jones have adequate evidence or not? Did he, should he have believed what he believed or not? Under the characterizations of justification about having adequate evidence or having good reason to believe or the right to believe, it seems like he did, and he turned out to be right, but just totally by accident. Okay. So, that's what Gettier is pointing out, that there are cases where you can turn out to be right about something and to have what appear to be good reasons to believe it, but they're still not connected up in the right way. It just seems like you got lucky. It seems like you got completely lucky. And that seems like it shouldn't count as knowledge. So obviously, what this means is, well, I'll get to that in a second. This is what we call epistemic luck. This is the issue of epistemic luck. If we come by a true belief by luck, even if it seems like we should have had good reason to believe it, it shouldn't count as knowledge. Okay. Why is this a case of epistemic luck? All right, it fulfills 3 criteria. First, Smith formed a belief on the basis of what appeared to be adequate evidence. That's the first part. 2, the evidence is not actually connected to the truth, and 3, the belief actually turns out to be true. So it's a case of epischemic luck. When you form your belief based on what seems to be adequate evidence, when the evidence isn't actually connected to the truth of the matter, and when the belief still turns out to be true anyway. That's a case of epischemic luck. Let me give you another example. I think works a little better than the Smith example that Gettier relies on. Okay, suppose that I am an accomplished con woman. I am very successful at pretending to be a professor. I go to random schools and I pretend to teach classes to groups of gullible students, like by recording videos and posting them onto the LMS. Super profitable. Professors make so much money. Anyway. Brilliant scheme on my part. I'm a con woman. I pretend to be a professor. I'm so good at it that students are always completely fooled and they believe the things I tell them. Very convincing. So a student asks me some question about when Charlemagne was crowned Holy Roman Emperor. And I just make up a round number. I say 800, the year 800. When was Charlemagne crowned Holy Roman Emperor, Professor? The year 800. Very good year. The student believes it. I'm making it up. I do not know when Charlemagne was crowned emperor. I may not even know who Charlemagne is. I might think he is a TikTok star or something. I don't know. Whatever. I make up a number. 800. So the student gives credence to this proposition. That's how it counts as a belief. The proposition, Charlemagne was crowned emperor in the year 800. Student gives credence to the proposition. It is a belief. Boom. The apparent justification is that I'm a professor, according to what the student thinks. The student thinks I'm a professor. I should know these things. And the student has what appears to be very good reason to believe that I am correct, and thus gives credence to the belief. So that is the apparent justification. Now, here is the twist. Charlemagne was crowned emperor in the year 800. I made up a number. I happen to be right. But it is just pure luck that I was right, and therefore pure luck that the student believed the correct thing. Pure coincidence. It could have easily gone the other way. And even if Charlemagne was crowned in some other year, I still would have said the year 800. So the student's belief formation is disconnected from the actual facts, even if it appears otherwise. Okay. So that's another case where the student shouldn't have knowledge, even though the student has a correct belief. So it has truth, it has a belief, and it has what seems to be justification. Okay. All right. So, now Gettier does not offer a solution. Gettier just points out the problem. Lots of other people have tried to figure out solutions to this. It's a big thing to argue about in epistemology. And basically it all boils down to figuring out how to specify justification in a way that accounts for epistemic luck. Okay, how can we specify justification? How can we describe it in such a way that beliefs won't turn out to be we won't call beliefs that are just lucky beliefs justified. Okay. All right. So, because I think, like when we go to Ayer's characterization of having the right to be sure, at least on the surface, it seems like the student in my class has a right to be sure. They can't be blamed epistemically for believing me. I've created a perfect deception. They have every right to be sure of what they said. So Ayer's characterization clearly doesn't work because having the right to be sure uh, didn't account for this situation. If we followed that as our characterization of justification, then the student is justified, and yet the belief was lucky, and there you go. Um, and if we go with Chisholm's characterization of having adequate evidence, that depends. It does would Chisholm say that the student had adequate evidence? Well, on the one hand, the student appears to have adequate evidence, but maybe Chisholm is taking sort of a holistic view of it, and unbeknownst to the student doesn't have adequate evidence. That may be closer to a solution I'm going to propose in a moment, but it's certainly not clear what Chisholm's answer would be here based on that characterization. So we're gonna talk about that in a moment. Okay, so how can we account specify justification in the way that accounts for this kind of thing? There's two directions we can go in. I'm not going to delve super geek into either one right now because that's sort of the topic of upcoming readings and lectures. But I'm going to give you a lay of the land of where we are and why. Basically, what all of this talk about just Gettier cases is doing is showing us why it is so important that we talk about justification. That justification isn't as simple as it sounds. So, okay. One method we could use is just say that um, we could bite the bullet and accept that sometimes luck is a factor in knowing things. Epistemic luck, specifically. Um, that if I do everything right, if I'm doing everything right as a knower, like the student in the Kong woman's class, if I'm the Kong woman, the student in my class is doing everything right as an epistemic agent. They haven't committed any blunders. They haven't ignored good evidence. They're doing good epistemic practices and so forth. They're carefully weighing. They're not just asking some random person on the street um, when Charlemagne was crowned Holy Roman Emperor. They're asking their professor, and that's responsible epistemic practice. So they're doing everything right. They get the right answer, but the fact that they got the right answer was just due to luck for reasons beyond their control. Some people would say we just have to bite the bullet and accept that sometimes luck is a factor. As long as you're doing everything you need to do as a knower, as an epistemic agent, some of your beliefs will turn out to be knowledge just because of luck, and there's nothing we can do about that without really screwing up our concept of justification. That leads us in what we would call an internalist direction, which is to say that knowing and being justified in particular, being justified has a lot to do with what's going on in your head as an epistemic agent. It is internal. And that you are, if you are aware that you have been doing the right kinds of things, you have access to, if you will, whether you are justified. And so I would be aware that I'm justified in certain beliefs because I am practicing good critical thinking. I'm reviewing my sources. I'm asking only experts. I am cautiously withholding judgment from things that I don't have good info about, blah, blah, blah. That is an internalist approach. Basically, it says I know when I'm justified because I can, I have all I have to do is review my own internal mental states, and I can see my justification because I'm like, oh, here's the reasons I believe this, and I can articulate all of those reasons, and that is a complete story of justification. Now, if we go in an internalist direction, we have to be willing to accept epistemic luck sometimes. Because the student did everything right. The student did good epistemic practices, and we would have to say on an internalist story, they are justified, and the fact that the belief turned out to be true only by luck is unfortunate and weird, but it doesn't affect the status of their justification. We're going to read more about that later in the semester. That's not very satisfying to a lot of people. So the other direction we could go in is that we can insist that the belief be formed in what we might call a truth-tracking way. Now that is to say that the indicators which serve as the basis for assigning credence to a proposition, so in this case it would be the thing the professor said. Like the proposition is Charlemagne was crowned in the year 800, and the stuff that makes you assign credence to that, that the person who's saying it appears to be a professor and says it with confidence and blah 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 blah, and they wrote it on the board and everything written on the board is true, stuff like that. The indicators that serve as a basis for assigning credence to the proposition are reliably connected to the external world in such a way that they would reflect whatever the truth happens to be. So, in other words, in the con-woman example, the indicators, the things I say, the answers I give, are not truth tracking. They're not reliably connected to the facts of the matter, to the external world. The truth has no bearing on what I say, and therefore what I say is not a reliable indicator of the truth. Think of it like a clock. A working clock is truth tracking. If the fact is that it is 3 p.m., the clock will show 3 p.m. if it is a working clock. If the fact is that it is 5 p.m., the clock will show 5 p.m. if it is a working clock. Whatever the truth of the matter is, the clock will reflect that if it is working, which is to say, if the clock is tracking the truth, if it is truth tracking. If the clock is not working, that is to say, if it shows 2 p.m. no matter what time it actually is, when it's 2 p.m., sure, but also when it's 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, the clock is not tracking the truth. It is not synced up with reality. So it is not a reliable indicator. It is not giving you information in a truth tracking fashion. Okay. So in the con-woman example, because the answers I give are not reliable indicators of the truth, a belief formed on the basis of my answers cannot be justified, even if they appear to be justified to the student, because objectively speaking, the basis for the student's credence is not reliable. It is not truth tracking. Okay, so this is an externalist view, which says that the stuff which determines whether a belief-forming mechanism provides justification or for the belief, the stuff that determines whether this method provides justification are features of the objective world. They're features of the objective relationships that exist, and not necessarily accessible to anyone involved. In the con-woman example, certainly I know that my beliefs are, or my statements are not true. So at least I would know they're not reliable. Um, but you can tweak the example without much effort. You could say that I'm not a con woman, I'm just delusional. And I don't know. I think I am a professor. And I don't know that the things I say are not reliable indicators of the truth. And the student is taken in, and the student doesn't know that the things I say aren't reliable either. And therefore, no one in the whole chain is aware of the unreliability, the non truth trackingness of the things that I say. Um, so objective features of the world are just facts about the world, and they aren't necessarily always going to be internally accessible to anybody involved in the whole chain. So that is an externalist approach, what we would call a reliabilist approach. Um, okay. On that picture, someone is justifying and giving credence to a proposition if both they have apparent reasons to believe, because that's still necessary. Um, you can't be justified in believing something if you think the reasons are crap. Um, well, maybe you can. Maybe you would be. I'll revisit that when we go into more depth on reliabilism. I would say no. I'd say you need both the internal confidence in the reasons and that the reasons actually turn out to be truth tracking. Okay. Now, so some people feel like this is a good solution, but it comes with its own downsides. The internalist thing comes with the downside that we have to just bite the bullet and accept that sometimes epistemic luck is a thing. Sucks, but there we go. Um, the externalist, reliabilist solution comes with its own problems also. So, one of the main objections is that on an externalist viewpoint, we might have a hard time knowing when we know things. We might often think that we are justified because we have apparent reasons to believe something, and then we could be wrong about that because it turns out that those reasons are not truth tracking. The broken clock is an example. If we don't know it's broken, we might look over at it and go, oh, it's 2 p.m. And if it happened to be 2 p.m., we would still get a true belief, but we wouldn't get a justified true belief on the externalist account because the clock isn't reliable. The clock isn't truth tracking. Um, Here's another example. A medieval doctor might form beliefs about what's wrong with a patient or how to treat it or whatever on the basis of his extensive medieval medical education based in Aristotelian, uh, philosophy and blah, blah, blah. Um, and he thinks that those are good reasons to form those beliefs because this idea of medicine has been around for, 1,000 years at this point or more. Um, but as it turns out, none of his beliefs are justified because this concept of health and medical care is completely wrong. His whole paradigm of reasoning is wrong. So none of his beliefs are justified, even if he happens to get something right by accident. My favorite example of this, real briefly, I'm not going to go into a whole thing about medieval humors and whatnot, but real briefly, under the Aristotelian theory of medicine, the human body was thought to have 4 kinds of fluids in it. They called them humors. It's not related to laughing. Anyway, they called them humors. 4 kinds of fluid: blood, bile, black bile or melon color, and phlegm. Right? Super sexy. Phlegm. Each one of these were associated with one of the 4 classical elements: earth, air, fire, and water. You know those if you've played Pokemon or watched Avatar. Um, uh, that amused Morgan. Anyway, But I tell you, everything did change when the Iron Nation attacked. Anyway, I've watched Avatar all the way through about 20 times, so anyway, permanently lodged in my brain. Or was I? Right. The four humors. Each one is associated with one of the four elements. Phlegm, for instance, is associated with the element of water. Now, the thinking was that all illness was caused by an imbalance of the humors. Certain illnesses were caused by an imbalance of blood. Certain illnesses were caused by an imbalance of bile, etc., etc., etc. And by imbalance, I mean you have either too much of it or too little of it. Kind of like having too much brake fluid or too little transmission fluid in your car. How do you get too much of something? Well, among other things, one of the ways that you get too much of something is by exposure to stuff associated with that humor and that element. For instance, blood was associated with fire, and it was associated with red meat. You could develop an illness due to an excess of blood if your diet contained too much red meat. Now, we know that if your diet does contain too much red meat, you can become ill. It doesn't have anything to do with having too much blood. It's got to do with, dietary balance. But, they had part of the picture correct. Now, the part that I find really interesting is this. They recognized that there was an illness that, to them, appeared to be caused by an excess of phlegm. A cold, we would call it. You have a cold. Now, when you have a cold, your body is producing a lot of phlegm. You blow your nose a lot, you cough it up, etc. Like I said, very sexy. To the medieval people, the idea that you were hacking it up and blowing it out your nose was proof that you had too much of it. Your body was trying to get rid of it. So you have an excess of it. Now, they have the causality reversed. They thought that the excess phlegm was the reason for the illness, not a symptom of the illness. But they did have the connection. They had figured out the connection that the too much phlegm is connected with having a cold. The best part is this. They thought that you caught a cold by spending too much time out in the damp and the chill. Because water and cool weather were associated with the element of water and therefore with the humor of phlegm. So how do you get an excess of phlegm in your body? You spend a bunch of time out in the cold and the wet. You then wind up with an excess of phlegm, and then you have a cold. Right? They were kind of right. They weren't completely right, but they were kind of right. How do you prevent a cold? Well, one way to do it is don't get all wet and sit around in wet clothes and the cold and stuff. They didn't know why. They didn't know that it had something to do with lowering your body temperature and lowering the efficiency of your immune system and blah, blah, blah. They didn't understand that. But they had the basic connection made correctly. So they were right, more or less right, about certain beliefs. But very, very clearly, they believed on the basis of bad evidence. The reasons why they held those beliefs were complete nonsense. So they wound up holding a correct belief for reasons that are complete nonsense. And that correct belief wound up, so it's a correct belief. So this is a perfect example of what we're talking about. Their concept of medicine was not truth tracking. It's not going to deliver correct results most of the time. But it wasn't so out of whack that it didn't deliver somewhat correct results at least some of the time. So the medieval doctor that forms beliefs on the basis of their medieval medical education thinks that he has a good reason to form beliefs. So he has apparent justification. But as it turns out, none of those beliefs are justified because the reasons for forming them are not truth tracking. This is all on our externalist model, our reliabilist model. If the reasons are not truth tracking, are not actually truth tracking, then the beliefs aren't justified, no matter how careful the doctor is being. Now, be aware, right? On an internalist model, the doctor would probably be justified in his beliefs because um, because he is doing everything right. He got the best education available. He is extensively studied. He carefully weighs the evidence by the only standard he knows. Um, he consults sources. He talks to other doctors. He's doing everything right as an epistemic agent. On an internalist model, he is absolutely justified in his beliefs. And he's justified but wrong. Um, which is a little scary. On the internalist model, you can be totally justified and still wrong, and that's worrisome. Or you can be justified and right, but only by luck, and that's worrisome. Okay. Um, Whereas on the externalist model, he is not justified because all of the things he's doing that make him confident that his beliefs are true are wrong. Like the idea of consulting experts and studying and getting the best education available, those things aren't wrong themselves, but given the state of the education available and things like that, they happen to be wrong in this case. They are objectively incorrect. Um, so he's not justified in that case. He does not know why this person has a cold on the externalist viewpoint. Now, that might not sound so bad. In fact, we might like that. We might say, no, that sounds right to me. Medieval doctor, they didn't know what they were doing, even though they thought they knew what they were doing. That I'm good with that. That they didn't know. They weren't justified, and therefore they certainly did not know. It's easy to look at it that way when we're talking about historical science and medicine. We look back and we go, oh, those primitive people, they thought they knew things and they were wrong. Ha ha ha. What's harder to swallow is that on an externalist account of justification, we might be in the same position right now and we have no way of knowing it. We have no way of being aware of it. As far, we are epistemically no better off than people were in the Middle Ages on the externalist paradigm. We have what we think are the best available ideas and theories about how everything works, and we form our beliefs carefully, and we consult experts, and blah, 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 and we do everything we can, and we therefore believe we're justified, and if it turns out that there are things we've gotten wrong in our very basic paradigm of belief formation, then we're just not justified, and there's zero way to detect that because it's an external relationship. It's an objective fact about the world. We can continually try to refine our paradigm and refine our second order beliefs about how we form beliefs, but it's fundamentally unknowable to us whether we are justified or not. We can at best make a guess at how justified we are. And that guess may be completely wrong because, again, I'm pretty sure the medieval doctors were proud of their education and their training, and I'm pretty sure they if they had to guess, if you ask them to guess whether they were on the right track, they would say yeah. They would say yeah, of course we are. We know where we're going. So okay, um, that's tough for a lot of people. Um, it's tough because it puts us in an awkward position. On the one hand, an externalist account that revolves around the objective reliability of belief formation mechanisms will absolutely get around Gettier cases. There is no situation in which a Gettier case can get you. Um, you can form beliefs that turn out to be true, and if you form them for an objectively unreliable reason, if the reasons you formed them were wrong, even though you thought they were right, you still didn't know anything. It absolutely defeats epistemic luck as a factor. Um, the problem is it puts us in a situation where if we're being realistic, it kind of throws us a skeptical challenge. We have to worry about whether we actually know anything, because we're left twiddling our thumbs and saying, does anyone twiddle their thumbs anymore? Have you ever met anyone who twiddled their thumbs? I'm getting off track. We have to wonder all the time if our best efforts, mentally speaking, epistemically speaking, are getting us anywhere. And we have to accept the fact that, sort of at a bare knuckles level of reality, not only do we not know whether we're justified in our beliefs, regardless of how justified we appear to be, we can't know, which is spooky. This Halloween is coming up. Very spooky. But yeah, this is why some people prefer internalist accounts. Because on an internalist account, at least the measure of whether I'm justified has a lot to do with what I'm doing, and I can review my own conduct. I can say, oh, did I do all the right things? Did I examine my evidence? Am I in a mental state where I can form reliable beliefs? Like I can be like, oh, am I hallucinating because I'm on painkillers? Maybe I am, so maybe I'm not justified. Um, uh, Generally speaking, sort of these kinds of reliabilist worries only come up very rarely on an internalist account. For the most part, you're worried about epistemic conduct. You're worried about um, whether someone is, consulting the best sources and critically assessing the evidence and things like that. And if so, they're justified, and if they don't, they're not. Um, on the other hand, in that case, epistemic luck is a factor. Sometimes Gettier cases happen, and we just have to roll with it. We have to go, okay, I guess. Sometimes, despite our best efforts, whether we know or not, will come down to luck. But at least we can assess our best efforts, and we can know. We can have awareness of our own level of justification to a pretty high degree. Um, and in an externalist approach, kind of seems like we can't. Like, we can hedge our bets, we can do our best as we understand it, but it could be that doing our best, is so badly misaligned with reality that even doing our best is hardly ever going to produce a good answer, a good belief. That was the case of the medieval doctors. Almost nothing they thought was correct, even though they were doing their best. Um, by any reasonable standard, they were doing everything they should do to ensure they got correct beliefs. But for reasons that were totally out of their control and unknown to them, um, doing their best was going to be the game was rigged. Doing their best wasn't going to help them. So why talk about Gettier cases? Can we solve the Gettier case problem? Ultimately, we're talking about Gettier cases not because we actually care about those weirdo situations. Um, Actual Gettier cases don't come up very often. And when they do, it'd be like, yeah, but okay, that's just a one in a million, and who gives a crap? But the fact that Gettier cases exist illustrates for us the need to push deeper to characterize justification more richly so that we really understand what we're up to. And it shows us some of the challenges to talking about justification. Namely, it shows us, especially with the externalist picture, it points us to a skeptical challenge about wondering whether we can ever really know whether we're justified, whether we really have justification or not. So that is a problem. And it's one that we're going to explore as we go forth in the semester. So, okay. Well, I hope you loved that. I hope it was just thrilling to you, and I hope it was everything you wanted when you enrolled in college. Um, don't forget to do the reading responses. There is no reading response for reading 9 or for reading 10, so enjoy your time off. Okay. All right, great. Have a good one. Bye. See you in the next video.